Millionaire David Whitman thought he had built an unshakable empire, wealth, reputation, a dream home, and a young wife he adored. But the night he came home early, everything he believed in cracked. He stepped through the door, only to hear muffled sobs echoing down the hallway. When he found his wife Aisha, pregnant and trembling, she wasn't the glowing woman he'd left that morning. She was bruised, her face streaked with tears. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Am I ugly? Am I just some monkey? Do I even belong in your world?" Those words didn't just sting. They carved him open deeper than any betrayal he'd faced in business. Something was terribly wrong inside his own house. And when David finally checked the hidden cameras he had once installed for safety, what he discovered wasn't the work of strangers at all. It was closer. Much closer, and when he set a trap to expose the truth, the revelation nearly destroyed not only his marriage, but the Whitman name itself. But before we go any further, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything, and it allows us to keep bringing you these powerful, life-changing stories. Now let's begin. From the outside, the Whitman estate was flawless. A sprawling lawn trimmed with precision, marble steps gleaming in the glow of the last rays of sunset, tall windows reflecting a life of elegance and control. But inside, the silence was suffocating, heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. David eased the door shut behind him, his suitcase landing softly against polished oak floors. He loosened his tie, his ritual after long days of commanding empires. But tonight, something felt off. Too quiet, no faint laughter, no distant music, not even the hum of a television left on for company. Only the hollow tick of a clock buried somewhere down the corridor. Then his eyes fell on a scarf carelessly draped across a chair, violet with embroidered edges. Aisha's. He lifted it and inhaled. It still carried her scent of cardamom and vanilla. He almost smiled, until he noticed how tightly twisted it was, as though someone had clutched it in desperation. His steps echoed against the marble as he walked deeper inside. And then he saw her. Aisha sat on the floor of the nursery beside an unfinished crib, her hand protectively curved over her belly, her other hand hiding her face. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. David's chest tightened. "Hey!" His voice cracked unexpectedly. She turned too quickly, wiping at her cheeks. Her makeup couldn't hide the faint bruise shadowing her jaw. "It's nothing," she whispered. "I just slipped." An accident. It was the same excuse she always gave. And yet, her fingers trembled stiffly when he held her hand. Through the open window, two staff members whispered in the garden. Their voices, low but sharp, drifted into the room. "Poor madam. She doesn't smile anymore." "Shh, don't say it too loud. The old lady comes by too often. People notice things." The words stung like sand in David's throat. He wanted to storm out and demand answers. But instead, he stayed kneeling by Aisha, guiding her gently toward their bedroom. Her steps were small, hesitant, and when she finally lay down, she turned her back to him, facing the wall. David sank into the chair beside her, gripping the armrests until the leather creaked. His eyes lifted to the corner of the ceiling, where a small black dome of a security camera blinked faintly. He had installed them months ago. A precaution, nothing more. But now, for the first time, he wondered what those cameras had really seen. He didn't move. Not yet. Instead, he sat silently watching the rise and fall of his wife's breathing. And slowly, a grim realization settled in his chest. Something poisonous was living inside his perfect home. And it wasn't going to leave on its own. Morning crept in pale and cold. Morning light spilled through the windows, thin, pale, the kind that makes everything feel colder than it should. The kettle hissed. The toaster clicked. The house went through its motions like clockwork, pretending things were normal, while the people inside it did the same. Aisha moved slowly around the kitchen. One hand steadied her against the counter, while the other spread butter on toast she never took a bite from. When the butter knife skimmed too close to the bruised skin on her wrist, she flinched, just barely. But David saw it. The soft snap of his laptop closing cut the silence sharper than it should have. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked. She nodded too quickly. "Will you rest after breakfast?" Another nod, eyes fixed on the floor. Each answer felt rehearsed, like lines whispered into a mirror until they sounded convincing. Outside, two groundskeepers strolled past the open window. Their voices carried low, words dressed in fake casualness. "Madam used to laugh out here. It's been quiet for weeks. Someone should say something." Who would listen? The words slid under David's ribs, heavy and sharp. He rinsed a mug that was already spotless, dried it far too long, then left it upright on the rack. Stillness pressed against his temples like a vice. "I've got calls to take," he muttered. Aisha only nodded again. Those nods were starting to feel like walls. In his study, David let the door click shut. He stood at the desk, hands braced on the cool leather blotter. In the corner, the security monitor waited. A matte black square, patient, watching. He typed in the code, paused, drew in a breath, then pressed play. The previous day unfolded in 4 tiled windows: foyer, staircase, kitchen, nursery hall. At first, it was all routine. The housekeeper carrying laundry, a courier at the gate, sunlight crawling across the marble. He scrubbed forward. Time-lapse shadows stretched like tides across the floors. 12 p.m., movement in the kitchen feed. David leaned in closer. His mother stepped through the back door. Pearl earrings gleamed, her posture rigid, every motion calculated, precise. She didn't glance at the camera, because people who believe they own a place forget it can look back. David let the timeline roll forward. First minute, polite smiles, civil words. Second minute, the air shifted. Eleanor's chin angled downward, Aisha's shoulders pulled tight. Third minute, the mask came off. Eleanor moved closer, fingers stabbing the air like a blade. No sound, but David didn't need audio. Her lips were sharp and cruel, shaping words he knew too well. "You don't belong here." Aisha didn't answer. Her palm pressed protectively against her belly, steadying herself as though balancing on a moving train. Then Eleanor's hand darted out, sharp, practiced, seizing Aisha's arm and shoving her against the counter. Aisha winced, catching herself on the edge. David's jaw locked until his teeth ached. He rewound, watched it again, slower. Each second gnawed at his stomach, but his feet didn't move. More clips flickered by. Eleanor in the nursery doorway, arms folded, glaring at the crib as though it had insulted her. Eleanor blocking Aisha's path with a chair, her lips shaping a sentence like a verdict. Then the slap, quick, flat, delivered without hesitation. Aisha steadied herself, blinked rapidly, swallowing down whatever sound fought to escape her throat. Outside the study, 2 housekeepers passed in the hall. Their voices dropped, a ribbon of hushed worry. "She's covering her cheek again. I saw the bruise. I wish he'd notice. He's always working. Maybe today." David leaned back in his chair. The leather groaned under his weight. On the screen, the paused frame burned into him. His mother's hand mid-air, Aisha half-braced against the counter. Heat climbed his neck, then cooled, then hardened into something cold, heavy and deliberate. He couldn't storm out in anger. That was Eleanor's stage. She'd twist fury into a performance of tears and outrage. No, if he wanted the truth to stand, he needed patience, proof, timing. He scrubbed forward another day, watched, another visit, another escalation. The pattern unfolded on the screen, and then it settled deep inside him, taking root in his chest like a stone. His thumb hovered over the controls, steady, unshaking. David pinched the bridge of his nose, eyes closed, drawing in slow breaths like a pilot, keeping a glide steady through violent turbulence. When he opened them again, his decision was already built, a structure solid and unshakable. He would give the truth space to expose itself. No shouting match, no distorted story, no convenient denials. Just clean evidence. Angles that couldn't be argued with. Cameras rolling, audio live. Light steady. This wouldn't be rumor or family drama. This would be fact. He muted the monitor and listened. The clock ticked. Footsteps faded. Somewhere in the house, a cabinet closed softly, too softly, as though whoever touched it didn't want to be heard. David rose. He adjusted a crooked photo on the credenza. his parents at a ribbon cutting, all smiles and polish. For a moment, his own reflection overlapped theirs in the glass. His throat tightened. He straightened the frame, then pressed his palm flat against the wood, grounding himself. This wasn't adrenaline. This was patience. A quiet departure. A car parked around the corner. Eyes on the feeds. Phone in hand. Timing set. Not vengeance. Proof. Proof for Aisha. Proof for their child. Proof that the air inside this house could be safe again. The monitor shrank to a pinprick of light, then went black. The room felt colder. David stood a moment longer, hands loose at his sides, then stepped into the hall. His face calm. His voice even. Carrying a decision he would not put down. He rose before dawn. Lay still long enough to hear Aisha's fragile breathing beside him. Shallow, broken by little tremors in her sleep. Quietly, he dressed, straightened his cuffs as if he were arming himself for war rather than breakfast. By 8, he kissed her forehead, whispered about meetings in the city, and left with deliberate noise. The staff noted his departure. The tires crunched down the driveway, but he didn't go far. Just a turn around the block. A stop beneath the heavy branches of a broad oak. The car cloaked in shade. From there his tablet glowed. Camera feeds in neat rows. His jaw tightened. He waited. Time slowed. Gardeners clipped hedges. A maid carried linens, ordinary, too ordinary. Then a silver sedan turned into the drive. His mother's car, smooth, slow. Eleanor stepped out as polished as ever, pearls at her throat, hair coiled in perfect order. She didn't ring. She didn't knock. She used her key. Inside, her heels struck the marble. Precise, measured, rehearsed. The cameras caught everything. Aisha in the kitchen, pouring tea, her shoulders already stiff with dread. Eleanor's shadow stretched across the tiles, long and sharp. David muted the audio so his own pulse wouldn't drown it out. He watched her lips shape bitter words. He saw the shove, the teacup crash, porcelain shattering across the floor like white shrapnel. Aisha bent to gather the shards, but Eleanor's hand yanked her upright. Fingers biting deep into her arm. David's breath burned in his chest. He gripped the tablet closer. His body screamed to move, but he forced himself still. Evidence had to be undeniable. Then Eleanor reached for the knife block. Fingers curled around steel. She lifted it, slow, deliberate, her face twisting with venom. The words she spat might as well have been etched in poison across the feed. That was enough. The car door slammed. His footsteps pounded up the drive. He tore through the side entrance, his voice ripping through the stillness like thunder. Enough! Both women froze. Aisha stumbled back, clutching her belly, tears streaming. Eleanor turned, knife hovering midair. Not shame in her eyes, but the cold shock of being caught. David advanced, one step at a time. His voice didn't roar. It cut steady, precise, every bruise, every threat. Every word is recorded. He pointed upward. The tiny red light blinked, unwavering. Witness to everything, Eleanor's hand shook. The knife slipped from her grasp, clattering against marble, ringing sharp before rolling into stillness. Her mask cracked. Rage slipped into fear. David pulled Aisha into his arms, pressing her trembling frame against his chest. His glare locked on the woman who had raised him, the woman he thought he knew. For a heartbeat, the silence was louder than any scream, then faint at first. Sirens. The sound swelled, slicing through the air outside, growing louder, closer, until blue and red lights bled across the windows. Tires crunched against gravel. Doors slammed. The polished calm of the Whitman estate shattered under the weight of authority. 2 officers stepped through the foyer, voices clipped, steady, purposeful. Their presence filled the house like a rising tide. David guided Aisha to a chair near the wall. She clung to him, her breaths jagged, her face buried in his chest. He stroked her hair slowly, whispering promises he'd never spoken aloud until now. Promises he meant. Across the kitchen, Eleanor stood frozen at the counter. Her pearls sat crooked, her face pale, but she still tried to hold the posture of a matriarch. She opened her mouth. No words came. The knife was sealed inside a clear evidence bag, glinting under the lights. David handed over his tablet. The officers watched in silence as the footage unfolded with brutal clarity. The shoves, the slaps, the venom in Eleanor's words, each one carved into Aisha's soul. When the clip ended, the officers didn't hesitate. They turned, cuffing Eleanor with calm efficiency. The sharp snap of metal against her wrists ricocheted through the marble halls like a verdict. Outside, neighbors had gathered near the gate, their whispers curling through the night air. So it's true. Those bruises weren't accidents. Money doesn't cover everything. Not this. David didn't look at them. His focus was only on Aisha, her hand trembling as it clutched his sleeve. He knelt in front of her, eyes locked on hers. "You're safe now." "I swear it," his voice cracked. Not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of truth. Eleanor was led past the cameras she had always ignored. Her empire shrank with every step. Under flashing lights, her face was no longer the mask of power, but the portrait of a legacy undone. Weeks later, the headlines died. Eleanor's name dissolved into court dockets and medical files. David never visited. Some blood ties weren't meant to be mended. Inside the estate, the air felt different, lighter. The nursery walls were freshly painted, warm and inviting. A crib stood ready, sunlight spilling across polished wood, and there in that quiet, David and Aisha breathed together. Steady, whole. For David, wealth wasn't in bank accounts or stock tickers anymore. It lived in moments, the curve of Aisha's smile returning, the faint kicks of life beneath her hand. Love stronger than legacy. Love chosen, every single day, because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is stand against his own blood, so the family he builds can finally live in peace. And that's the reminder this story leaves us with. The greatest battles aren't always in boardrooms or city streets. Sometimes they're fought in the heart of our own homes. If David's choice to protect love over legacy moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, so you never miss more powerful stories like this. And if it touched you, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.